We got a guy for that.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Thanks, guys. Thanks for letting us know. So today we're going to be talking about how to prepare for the changing world order. So
Yeah. I love these new headlines, the changing of the world order.
Well, there's been some craziness going on. I mean, with COVID and everything else, everything got
That's
shut
not
down.
new.
Well, but everybody, the changes, everyone thought that it would just end and it would just be over and then the economy would just restart and everything would go back to normal. And that's just not what's happening.
Well, that's just not very wise.
Right.
To actually have that come from that point of view. I mean, come on.
Well, that's what we've been told by the administration. We've been told by everybody. Inflation's going to go away. Supply chain issues are going to get fixed. And none of that's happening. And now what's starting to happen is that different countries are starting to want to use their currency to buy things.
Yeah, guys, you think you got to think with your own brain and not with the media. Seriously, these things unravel and come back very slowly. So people moving home to work from home that don't want to, now they call it the Great Resignation, as if that wasn't going to happen. People are now, they're migrating to different spots. They're moving to different areas. They're working from different areas. They're discovering. So, when people had, things happen. It's like the frog in the pot, you don't know that you're in the pot. You're slowly, all of a sudden your commute is an hour, hour and a half. All of a sudden your child care is $3,000 or $4,000 a month. All of a sudden you both are working a lot, and all of a sudden you're both working, 60, 70 hours a week, a lot. And then boom. And now you're home, and now you're reassessing. And so that's what's happened. And they're not coming back. A lot of people are gonna and this is just migration, I know, but the Federal Reserve has been doing this for a long, long time. If you really go back to the 70s, when the dollar came off the gold standard, then that's when the dollar became a floating currency, which is called a fiat currency. So this has been going on for 50 years.
Yes.
Fiat currency means that you can print as much as you need, and and therefore it's fiat. So it appears that you're getting wealthier, but really what's happening is there's more dollars in the system.
Right.
So that's been going on, and the Fed has been using that mechanism forever. Mm-hmm. So it's not new. Every country has done this, and that's if you go way back, you could, I'll tell you one of the great books. It's a little conspiracy in there too. Is The Creature from Jekyll Island, which is a great book written by Edward Griffith. He's a wonderful man. You met him.
Yep. It's a very long book.
It is a very long book, but it talks about the history of the Federal Reserve and how it was formed. And Jekyll Island is an actual island that a lot of very wealthy people, including J.P. Morgan, went and created what's called the Federal Reserve. And this has been going on for a long, long time. So if you really take a look at it, the education, the unionizing of the education, the same thing with medicine. It's all kind of happening at the same time. So now people are just a little bit more aware of currency, and Bitcoin kind of brought that to light.
Yeah, I mean, I think Bitcoin brought it to light, but I think also all this printing did too, because now you have, Saudi Arabia wants to use, their own money, you know what I mean, to buy.
But do you know why?
Russia. Well, because they want to get off of ours.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we are the world's largest consumer,
mm-hmm.
which means that we pay people in dollars. And if you really want to get educated on this topic, go to George Gammon's channel. As you know, George is my partner in the collective. We do a mastermind together. And George talks about what's called the shadow banking system. So what the shadow banking system is are offshore U.S. dollars.
Mm-hmm.
That's all it is. So the Federal Reserve doesn't actually track those.
Right.
You think about this. Think about that. So we pay, let's say we buy stuff from China. We pay them in U.S. dollars. That's off. That is not part of that. That's in the shadow banking system. Mm-hmm. So because they don't like our dollar and we're manipulating our dollar how we want, right now through printing, they don't like it. So take a look. The other thing you should take a look at is take a look at the countries that have been buying gold since all of them, China, Russia, they've been buying gold as a safe storage of value, not necessarily as an investment, but as a safe storage of value. So the right thing to do would be to take our U.S. dollars, buy gold.
Well, and so I think we're a little bit all over. So let's refocus.
Sure.
Okay. So we've been the reserve currency since 1945. And before that, it was the British pound. So Ray Dalio just did a great video that was very popular on YouTube that was talking about the cycle of every reserve currency, because every reserve currency goes through a cycle, and one reserve currency is not the reserve currency forever. So basically, when he was going through this cycle, he said when you first have a reserve currency, everyone wants to borrow against it, and that helps grow the currency.
Well, I think it was before 1945, actually. But regardless, when the British pound fell, I think that was in the late 1800s, early 1900s. But the point is he's accurate.
Yeah.
We did get the world's reserve currency. That's what's in the book, The Creature from Jekyll Island. And so the dollar, the U.S. dollar, is the world's reserve currency. That is true.
And we want people to borrow against it. We want foreign investments to borrow against it. George Gammon told me we even want people. The reason we're not bringing jobs onshore, you always wonder that, like, why aren't we bringing more jobs into the United States? It's because when we outsource our jobs, we pay them in dollars. So if that's beneficial to us in the way that they have to take our currency if they want to work for us. And as you said, we're the biggest consumer. So all of that helps to grow a reserve currency, which leads to years of growth and prosperity for that country, which is what has happened
that is what's
to
happened.
us.
And for a long time after we got the world's, by the way, the reason it was called the pound, it was the sterling pound. Our gold was our dollar was backed by gold for the longest time. And you go back and look at the history of that when FDR outlawed gold in the 30s, I think it was. And then Nixon took it off the gold standard in the 70s. And so it's floating now, which means they can print it. They can do whatever they want. So I think the big issue here, and we're going to just take it one more step. The reason why people are looking, I think, is because it's affecting their pocketbooks through inflation. And so they're looking at not only, we can talk about the supply chain and all that kind of stuff, but let's just focus on money printing. When the government, even the Fed, had a target of 2% inflation. Okay, so that's policy. So what does that mean? That means after 10 years, it technically, per their target, that things are inflating 10% or 2% a year or 20%. So that means that if you're holding cash, you're in trouble. That's the Fed's policy. So as you guys know, it was well over 7 this year. So people are starting to wake up and they're going, man, my gas is more, cars are more, food's more, my cost of living's more, rent's more, all that stuff. And they're all independently different reasons. But the point is things are more. And now we have these supply chain issues. So now people are digging into this money printing issue. But we've been talking about this on this channel for a couple of years about the printing and how it's going to create inflation. Nobody listened. So now it's happening. And so, to your point, people are looking for alternative ways. What can I do right now so that I'm not going to get deflated away?
Well, and it's also around the world, right? Because if you're, in Saudi Arabia and we're paying you in dollars, the dollars we're paying you in is buying you less too. So before, it was always, the U.S. dollar has always been predominantly stable. So now that it's not stable, Ray Dalio calls this the tipping point. And that's when people lose faith in the reserve currency. So not necessarily people in the US, because that's our money we take, but people all over the world are starting to lose faith in our reserve currency, because when they take it, we keep printing it. So it becomes worth less and less.
Yep.
And so now they're looking at different alternatives. And Ray Dalio said this is what leads to the decline in the reserve currency.
It's possible. I will tell you something that hopefully doesn't surprise you, but there's never been in the history of the world a currency that's survived.
Right.
And there's been over 2,000 of them ever. Now, it's hard to believe that it could happen on our watch, but I don't know. I don't know if Ray Dalio is accurate or not. Obviously, he's very, very smart. I've read all his books. I really, really enjoy his YouTube videos. But the problem is that nobody trusts Russia. Nobody trusts China. And so what will be the reserve currency?
Well, and that is the question.
That is the
right?
issue.
Because nobody, like to your point, nobody trusts any of them. People say Bitcoin, but realistically, most governments don't want Bitcoin to be the reserve currency unless it's a very small country because they want the ability to print their own money. So they don't really want some decentralized currency. The only people that's beneficial for are your small economies. So like your El Salvador and things like that. So the question is, if it's not the dollar, what's it going to be? And I know, or is it just going to be a mismatch of a whole bunch of different currencies and countries just pay in their own?
So that's what the euro was. So the euro, I can't remember how many countries are involved in the euro, but I want to say it was 23, maybe 26, something like that. They all had their own individual currency. Denmark had theirs, and Germany had theirs, and as we all know the history of Germany. But now it's all the euro. So this has all been tried before, and this is why everybody's talking about digital. I think China came out with a digital, and I think the U.S. is talking about a digital. Again, to dig more into this topic, I would follow George Gammon. The other thing that I did speak to somebody on this topic once, and they said, listen, there is no good alternative right now to the U.S. currency, and we are what they call the cleanest dirty shirt. And I think that there's a lot of accuracy around that. So there's talk about there being doing a world type currency, but it's not an easy.
That's not an easy thing. It didn't go well in Europe. Britain was upset because they were pulling all the weight, and Italy and Greece and
Germany,
lesser economies.
Too, yeah.
Yep, and Germany.
Germany was pulling.
Yep.
At one time, Germany was, in their words, saying that they were the reason the euro was strong.
Exactly. So, and Shiv from YouTube said no one trusts the U.S. anymore, which is a very good point as well.
Yeah, he's got a point.
Yep.
So so there's challenges with that. I remember when Greece went down after and they started they went into hyperinflation, and they're part of the Eurozone.
Yeah.
So things can happen when you're worldly.
Yeah, and the world doesn't always get along, and we can't even get along to make basic decisions.
We know that right now. Yeah.
Let alone anything else. But I think what's important is, and what we're experts in is what happens to real estate when there is, like, say, worst case scenario, the dollar no longer is the reserve currency, it goes somewhere else. What happens to real estate? And I think that that's a very interesting take. And real estate is a tangible asset. So it is worth something always. Yeah,
I'm not a dollar expert. The dollar's not going to inflate like Zimbabwe or like they could devalue it though, like they did in Mexico, the peso. But at the end of the day, all it does is it if you're in fixed rate debt, you're in great shape. If you're in savings, you're in bad shape. That's the bottom line. So we've been talking about that repeatedly. Savers are losers, literally. Even the Fed said that you're going to lose 2% a year, but now it's closer to over 7%. So that is set up that way. Here's why. We don't have a balanced budget, and we're heavily in debt, as we all know. Well, no politician is going to stand on a platform and say, I'm going to raise taxes to cover my expenses. So they do it through inflation. They do it through this hidden tax. The other thing that you should look at, everybody compares this to 1970s and 1940s. So 1940s, we had the war, financed the war. And 1970s is a little bit different issue. But you should go back and look at those time frames and go take a look at interest rates and go take a look at what happened with inflation. If we have high inflation, what it really does is it reduces debt, including the government debt. That's what happens when inflation is high. So if you're in debt and you're in good debt through real estate, then what's going to happen is you're actually going to be paying those off with cheaper dollars later. The debt's fixed. Right. So right now, I think the U.S. is, and I know I'm probably going to get blasted when I say I think it's over 30 trillion. I think that's about right. If as that 30 trillion is being inflated, deflated away with inflation. So that's what happens. Same thing. Like if you're in, $30,000 in debt, you're and it's fixed. The debtor wins. The creditor does not. That's what's important to know. If you're owed money and you've loaned somebody money, then inflation's bad for you. Hyperinflation or anything like that just basically makes it even better for the debtor, not for the creditor. So that's how that works.
And so what if somebody, so obviously, as you just said, if you have that fixed rate debt, as we talk about all the time on this channel, it's much easier to pay off with inflation. And even if the reserve currency was no longer the reserve currency, it would even be easier to pay off. But the question is, what about home values? Because a lot of people are buying their homes. They're worried. Yep. Should I sell now? What if something were to happen with the dollar? That's deflation.
So, yeah, I mean, if you take a look at that's what the government's afraid of. Mm-hmm. And I'm not an expert in these things, but I always go back to my mom still owns the home I actually grew up in. My mom still owns it, believe it or not. They bought it for $10,000. Mm-hmm. Think about that, right? This is a long time ago, obviously. She still owns it. I think it's worth somewhere over 700 now or something like that. Okay, all she did was want to buy a home. So if you go back and think about the childhood home you were in, or something that you bought or lived in a long time ago, you're going to see that it was worth a lot less than it is today. That is inflation, period. Now, we haven't really had in this country massive deflation, although you can say that during that last crash in 2008, things got deflated, which is true. Some real estate did crash. Prices did crash, and that was an oversupply issue as a result of loose credit and a bunch of other things. So it can happen. It definitely can happen. But as I did a Tony Robbins talk last week, and I got asked this question, and I said, if you guys are buying something that you're expecting to go up, then that's not really a strategy. That's just gambling. That's just hoping that the market continues to go up. But if you're buying something that cash flows, and this is what we talk about all the time, cash flow is cash flow. So the value of something might go down, but if it still cash flows, then you're in much, much better shape than if you're just relying on it going up or down. The other piece of that is, well, what if values go down and rents go down? It's true. So what are the two options? People buy a house, or they go homeless, or they rent, right? Unless you can think of a fourth one, I'd be happy to know.
Yeah.
So, what's going to happen is if people start to lose homes, they default into rentals. And what are the other options? The options are the street. And the government's going to step in like they have before.
Plus, people make smart choices. They bunk up. They live together. Yeah, they go to
family up. They friends up.
Area.
And the government's going to come up with a way to print more money and give it to either the people or the landlords to keep them into shelter. Shelter and food. Lack of shelter and food creates chaos.
So a lot of people are mentioning how the yield curve has been inverted now this weekend. Do you see that, there's such a demand on housing and there's such a shortage, and a lot of people are saying, historically it's always led to a crash within a year. Is that something that you see right now?
So I did a video on this, and if you guys missed it, Jerry, when was that? It was last week. Yeah. It talks about the recession, actually, and it talks. One of the things I brought up was the yield curve. Let's put it this way: a negative yield curve predicted recession in the in the last many recessions, there's been negative yield curves.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I'm going off of memory now, but I actually had the data, and it's in the video at the time. But usually it's like 6 to 12 months later is kind of the crash. So the yield curve is definitely something that everybody's talking about. It's definitely something you should be watching. And it's been pretty predictable, so it's a little scary. That's why I did the video last week.
Mm-hmm. So you said you think it's possible, even with the demand and the low inventory.
But let's look at the other side of it. The demand and low inventory is accurate, but now let's look at affordability and interest rates and inflation. You have to look at those things.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to look at the whole thing. You can't just say, hey, we're low supply and we're demand. So I'm not an economist, and I'm trying to figure this out too. Obviously we all are. And so again, I try to learn what I can. But I listen to guys that I think are much smarter than I am. Guys like George Gammon and Brian Snyder and some of those guys I think are just brilliant.
Okay, and then people also have other questions on. Did you think that there was, with the inflation, do you think that rates are going to continue to rise, or?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, that's not an opinion. I mean, the Federal Reserve said they're going to. They've said that they're, I think, Jerry, what did they say? 5 or 6 times this year? Yeah, the Fed. Go just Google it. The Fed said they're going to raise them 5 or 6 more times. So all they've done is raise it a quarter point, I think. And by the way, the markets build this in beforehand, so it's not like, the Fed did it. Things are going to react. A lot of these things are already pre-packaged and pre-built in.
Henry's wanting to know from YouTube, do you think they'll continue to rise realistically since we have elections coming soon?
That's a heck of a point. Yeah, midterm elections. These are big ones. Mm-hmm. Midterm elections. So I think that the Fed is concerned about inflation and hyperinflation. That's what I think. And I think that they're concerned about stagflation, and which is no growth with inflation. And I think that all of those things are concerning. Again, their target is 2%. Just Google it. You'll see. The Fed's target is 2%. We're well above that. And so they typically have used interest rates to move up when they're to tamper inflation. That's typically one of their tools in their toolbox. The problem is, obviously, when you increase rates, you affect consumption. And that's part of GDP, gross domestic product, consumption. So the big issue, one of the interesting things to watch, if you guys are digging into stuff like I am, are savings rates. Savings rates are really, really high right now. If you take a look at savings rates, when money's in savings, it's impossible to have inflation. Or I'm sorry, it's not impossible to have inflation. When money's in savings, by definition, that means it's not in velocity, and therefore it's not chasing goods and services. So that's another concern that the government has. Mm-hmm. If everybody moves to savings, it's actually an issue. John Maynard Keynes, one of the monetary guys from way back, he talks about this. He's like, the money needs to move in order to have a small economic increases and keep everybody thinking that they're actually getting a little wealthier. We have to have a little bit of moderate inflation. That's how the system's set up. So in other words, if it's flat, if your house stays flat in price, you're not going to be happy. So therefore, just having it grow a little bit over a period of time is good. It makes everyone feel better. It doesn't necessarily mean you're getting wealthier, because some of that could be inflationary. But if it's sitting in savings, then it's not moving. And so the one thing that you have to take a look at is what a lot of people don't really monitor is the velocity of money.
Yes.
So as money moves, as I pay, let's say you work somewhere, I pay you, then you pay someone else. Let's say rent or your car payment or the grocery store or whatever you do. Maybe you use it to go buy lunch. That money moves. That velocity of money is important, and so that's something that you can watch. You can watch savings and you can watch the velocity of money, because once that velocity of money stops, it actually poses another problem. And I think that's actually what they might be concerned about right now.
Right, because people are worried with inflation,
Yes.
and then they're not spending money.
Correct.
Now, we did tell people, how to prepare, so we're going to get into that. But first, make sure you hit the like button. It really helps us out. We do these videos for you guys, and we really just appreciate you hitting the like button and subscribing.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it, as always.
So we kind of touched on this, but people probably want to hear it directly. So when you're preparing for the dollar not being the reserve currency, or you're preparing for inflation, it's really not much different. You kind of touched on it, where you don't want to be in savings and you want to be in good debt. That's what's going to benefit you.
Yeah. I mean, so I always say, be the Fed. Now, what does that mean? What does it mean to be the Fed? Just, you can get angry. For sure. You can sit behind your TV or your computer and bitch and moan and say, oh my God, I'm getting killed by this inflation, or you can do something. And the reality is that you have to look at assets that move with inflation, period. And cash is not one of those things right now.
Right.
So you just need to be very, 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 very careful. And it actually, if you really go back and look over the last 10 years, it's been the same. If you had a $10,000 in the bank 10 years ago, it's the same 10 grand today. It just buys you less. So, and it, for a long time, the Fed did a pretty good job of keeping it, between 1% and 2%. But now it's a bit off course, and I don't see it getting any better.
I know they keep saying it's going to, but
I just don't. I mean, that's what they have to say. They're not going to come out and say, "Oh my God, things are bad," and but take a look at and we haven't even talked about the war, and hopefully that dies down very, very soon. It's just horrible what's happening there, but there are a lot of things that are going to be disrupted as a result of that. And we're already seeing it. That I'm talking about relations, I should say, from country to country. I've even seen one person make a prediction that this could be the end of globalization.
Yeah. So
what that means is, right now we're a very global society. We buy stuff from Ukraine, we buy stuff from Russia, we buy stuff from Europe, and vice versa. And so that could change things dramatically. So there's a lot of things that could happen there, and what that means is that could be another issue around supply chains. Right now, there's choke points on all kinds of stuff for all kinds of reasons, and the supply chains aren't going to get any better anytime soon. I think that we're here for a while.
Yeah, and TK seems to think that Powell's very cautious, and he won't even raise 5 times this year.
Yeah, I hope so.
We will see.
Right. Yeah.
So make sure you guys join us tonight. We're doing a premium happy hour for our premium members on the recession. Ken's thoughts on the recession. We're going to deep dive into that. If you're not a member, go ahead and sign up, kenmcelroy.com/premium, and you can use premium live for 7 days free.
Nice.
All right. So let's dive into our premium questions, because our premium members also can ask Ken questions, and he makes sure to answer them.
Happy to do it.
Yes. So we have some good ones today. So Damon is asking, with inflation and rental rates both rising, if you're currently renting in a place you live, would you recommend to keep renting while hunting for a cash flowing property, or invest in a home to get out of the rental situation?
Very good question.
A lot of people are probably in that situation.
Yeah, it's a great question. So here's the thing. I know lots and lots of landlords that are not raising people's rents.
Do you?
I do.
Okay.
Yeah, I do. I know a lot of people that have said, we bought this property a long time ago, and there's a reason why I'm setting up, you can't just assume that every landlord is going to be raising rents. There are some that don't know that their rents are way under market because they live out of the country, out of the state. There are some that just don't want to because they have great relationships with the tenants and they're happy with the cash flow they've got. There are some that are take a position that, hey, we don't want to, it's bad enough and we don't want our tenants to have to be displaced. So the reason I bring all that up first is because there's if you're in one of those situations, then you probably should stick where you are. So the risk is, of course, that you're severely under market. But we buy properties all the time that are severely under market. I mean, we're looking at a property right now in Dallas, Texas, where the rents are $750 per unit under market. So it can happen. And I think that so that's number one. If you're in a situation where you think your rents are going to go up significantly over the next couple of years, and that's not every market, by the way, then you probably need to look for some kind of an alternative, whatever that might be. And there are definitely markets that are declining. If you take a look at some of the migration patterns that we've talked a lot about, there are markets that are definitely declining, and so it's a math issue.
Yep. It just depends, Damon. I mean, you definitely, if you're paying cheap rent, then maybe not. But most likely, you're going to want to get a place, get a fixed rate mortgage, and call it a day.
Yeah, if you can. And don't forget, you get tax benefits from having that mortgage. And if you might even be in a situation where you can actually rent out the other rooms or do a house hack situation, or that's what a lot of people are starting to do now. So if you can, buy yourself a 3 or 4 bedroom house and rent out the other rooms to people that and you can possibly even cover that mortgage, and that's a great way to do it.
Yep. So Jane from YouTube has a good question. She is wondering if we see 40-year mortgages becoming the new norm.
Yeah, that's a good question. So let's talk about what that is. So they're already out there. All it does is take, let's say you have a $100,000 mortgage and they amortize it over 30 years. Now they're amortizing it over 40 years. It also means that you have a lower payment. That's essentially what a 40-year mortgage means. So I think that as we start to get into this affordability issue, yes, the answer is that the mortgage companies, just like if you take a look at, like back in the day when I first was buying a car as a kid, it was 48 months. That was the finance time. Now they're doing it for 72 months. I think maybe in 84. I don't really even know. First it went to 48 to 60, 60 to 72, and then 72 to 84. So all that really does is spread out the payment over a longer period and lower it for you. So it's very possible that happens. The one thing to watch is what they call the MIP, the mortgage insurance premium, which is another cost. So that's the one thing to watch. But I think these 40-year mortgages, I think that's a very, very interesting and good point.
Yeah, it is interesting. And, it's I was reading a lot about that because I do think that is going to be the next thing that they do that'll become normal. The problem with it is that, you want to eventually pay off your home. You don't want to be retired and still have a mortgage. And so that does make it more difficult to do if you're only paying the minimum payment every month. So the next question comes from ST. They are in Fort Lauderdale in a great school system. Their house was selling for $395 pre-COVID, and now it'll sell for $600. In order for them to retain this increase in value, should they sell their home now or hold it for a long time? They're worried that an increase in interest rates are going to drop the current equity gain. What do you advise?
So those are all really good questions. What I tell everybody is if you're going to scoop that equity, you have to calculate the whole thing. So you have to look at the tax you're going to pay, and you have to look at where you're going to move. So those are two big things that weren't mentioned in the question. So that has to be set. So if you have 2 homes, let's say, or you have another one that you want to move into and you're happy moving there, then by all means, take that hit take that take that cash, but know that you will have some tax associated with that. The one thing that rising interest rates have been known to do is lower the amount of real estate that somebody can buy. Period. Because again, going back to if your payment's up, then they can afford less, and it's going to slow down the housing market. I think if you take a look at the housing market, actually has had 4 months of negative, or slowdown in the last 4 months. Now I don't know if that's part of that's as a result of anticipating the interest rate increase and or even after, but time will tell. And so if you look at history, people, when interest rates go up, people can afford less. So it's possible that happens, but it's hard to know.
But then they're also paying a higher interest rate. So, because we had Betty on YouTube ask if she should wait or wait to buy in September because maybe prices have went down, and they possibly could, but they also could keep going up, and the interest rate will most likely be higher. So you have to consider that.
It's a great question. I think that take a look at cars. Cars prices have gone up, and so the dealerships are solving to the payment. My son bought a car last week. He traded in another one, and not brand new, but a used car. And that car had gone up a lot, but he was solving to his payment. He was trying to get to a couple $100 a month payment. That's where his head was the whole time. And so once he got there, he bought it. It's almost like the price was irrelevant. So it's the same kind of thing sometimes in the home buying. The lender's gonna lend based on the people's financial capability. And if there's 40-year mortgages, as an example, like what just came up, that's going to help. If the interest rates are low, that's going to help. But as interest rates go up, then people either have to come up with more of a down payment, or be able to afford that higher payment. One or the other.
Yes, exactly. And so, I guess to answer the question, it's more just if you do sell, if you hold long term, you're probably going to get that money back, even if it were to go down. And, it's just tough. You know what I mean? Because it depends on why you're holding a house. If you're holding it just to be able to flip it and make money, then now might be a good time to sell it. But realistically, like you said, where are you going to live? What are you going to do? If you're downsizing, maybe. But
yeah. Everybody's, and I get this, everybody's super concerned about the price of a home. Where you should be focused is on the rental piece if you're buying for an investment. So if you're buying for an investment, you should be watching rents. You should be watching what's happening for supply in a given area based on where people are going. Then and if it's a long-term hold, which is what we teach, then it's not going to be as much of an issue. But if you're concerned about buying something today and it being less in a year, then then you're probably not going to buy.
Right. So Eric from Premium says he's in the process of closing on his first rental. It's a single family home in Tampa. He wants to know, should he Airbnb it or rent it out on a long-term lease?
I'll let you take this one. This is good. She's the Airbnb queen right now.
Well, yes, I have some friends doing things like this. So Eric, if you're in a community that allows you to Airbnb, then you might want to try Airbnb. If you're in a place where, you're around things, a desirable location to Airbnb. If somebody was on vacation, would they want to stay in your place? Are you by amusement parks? Are you right by the beach? Are you on the beach? If you're kind of in a random city center, I don't know how successful it will be. If you have an HOA, you probably cannot Airbnb, so you're going to want to do the long-term rental because, we ran into that with our HOA stuff.
And there's a webinar you did.
Yep, and there's a webinar that we did on the site. It's great. We talked to Jack, who owns a Airbnb company here in Scottsdale. They run it really well. Tons of great tidbits in there. It is on the site, kenmcelroy.com/webinar, and you'll be able to find it there. Highly recommend you listen to it. It was about an hour.
Yeah, and then if you don't want all that, because it is a business, and you do have to pay a percentage to Airbnb, and you have to furnish it and all those things, then I personally, I like the long-term lock and leave model, but that's just me. I don't, I have enough businesses. I have enough stuff going on. I don't really want to have to follow all that stuff. So I would rather just stick a nice family in there, or somebody, not necessarily just a family, but somebody that is credit worthy, and sign a nice lease, just like we did on the last one we bought.
Yep.
And not worry about it long term. Yes, we can make more money on that particular one on Airbnb, but we decided to do it on a long term basis. So it was just an easier decision, and it still cash flows, I think, well over $1,000 a month. So
Yep.
we're just doing that.
If you are listening, please hit the like button. It really helps us out here, trying to get over 200. All right. Alex from Premium wanted to know, with the recent news and interest rates, would you recommend a cash out refinance now? She has some rentals with about 50% equity.
Yes, 100%.
My question is, why didn't you do it before?
Well, it's okay. I
Yeah.
think, yes, the answer is yes. I would definitely do that. Rates are ticking all over the place right now. The one thing that you need to be careful of, though, is you need to take a look at your occupancy on the ones that it sounds like you got 50% equity, but you also got to take a look at the occupancy on those, and hopefully you have a track record there, and make sure that you're not pushing yourself too far. So, in other words, you don't want to, like my partner and I, Ross, we really don't like more than 70% debt to equity on our stuff. In fact, in a lot of cases, we're at 50% and 60%. In some cases, we're even less. So it depends on the property, too. If you have something that's full all the time, then by all means, because it is tax-free, and you can use that for other things. Also, if you do, of course, then you don't have a place to put it, then you're in a situation, again, like we talked about in the beginning, which was having a lot of cash and a lot of inflation pending.
So I have another question on Premium from Therese, and I think this is a really good one because I think this is an example of where people can kind of get in a not great situation. So I want your take on it. So she was going to be buying a project that was going to be cash flowing in New Jersey, but the family member that was going to fully back her on the property will no longer be able to do so. So she's now looking at a private money lender that can secure $430,000. And then now she's just looking for the difference for the down payment. So she really doesn't have much cash of anything. She's asking how you suggest she obtains the additional fund, and if maybe she can go to another hard money lender for that. So the reason I want to bring this up is because I think people can get in a lot of trouble with hard money lending if they aren't 100% sure they can secure the loan after the hard money.
Yeah, so it's a really good question. So first of all, thank you for basically you're financing 100%. Mm-hmm. So at high interest rates. So that's really cut through all the, everything, all the narrative. You're borrowing all the money at a very high interest rate. So we had a really good firm on here called Capital Fund One, and it was interesting because their loans are not out very long, if you remember. Mm-hmm. So hard money, the right way to use hard money is when you have a short-term need. So that's what I would just say to you is be careful. If you're planning on, if you have a plan for this property and you're going to get a lot more money for it, let's say in a 3 or 4 or 5 month period, then hard money is pretty good option because you're going to pay a higher amount on that money for a short-term time. But if it's something that you're going to hold long-term and you're financing the equity and the debt long-term, I think it's a real recipe for a disaster potentially.
Well, even short-term, what if the market does take a change? And this is when people do get in trouble with the market. Because if you think that you can sell it for more, because she did say she's buying it at a little bit of a discount, if you think you can sell it for more and then for whatever reason you can't sell it for more and now you're stuck with a hard money loan, it's risky.
It's tight too. Yeah, you got to take a look at it. Has to be significantly more. So you have real estate commissions, you have renovation costs potentially, you have hold costs, you have interest costs on the money, and then you have tax. So all of that stuff has to be figured into the whole equation. So make sure that you're way into the money, not just at a little bit of a discount. But Danille's right. If the market changes for some reason in your market and you're sitting on that hard money, that is exactly what takes people down.
Yeah.
Because that real estate will go back to that lender and your credit will be in trouble.
And Nurse Jean, she had asked what hard money is. And hard money basically is using a private lender. They're a lot looser with who they lend to, but you're going to be paying 11, 12% interest. So it's very, very high. And normally it's like a short-term thing while you get traditional financing.
Yeah. So like a normal payment, normal debt would, for something like that we would buy would be like, let's say 4. So hard money, and that would be a long-term 30-year term. Hard money is less than a year typically, and a lot, 2-3 times that.
Yes. So Nathan said, last year you talked about the importance of having a 6-month cash reserve to cover operating expenses. Yeah. I've taken that action, and he does have 6 months now.
Nice.
But the problem is inflation's killing him because he feels like that 6 months keeps going down.
Yep.
So he said, in your opinion, would it be a responsible way to hedge inflation by buying some gold with that money so that he could convert it back and forth?
That's a heck of a question. So we have 6 months reserves, as you guys know. I like to have that. We originally were at 3, now we're at 6. I actually think having liquidity heading into these headwinds is actually still a good idea. The real issue is, just know that gold is not, currency. So you just got to be prepared for that. But I have done that personally. I have cash and I have gold, as you know.
Mm-hmm.
And gold is money. So it's not a bad way. The real issue is just having that reserve. But gold can go down too. Just know that.
Yeah, and also, like you said, it's not bad to have some cash because you don't know when you're going to need it and when you might need it. And it's just a reserve. It's just good to have it as a reserve.
And I'm not a speculator, but I will tell you, George Gammon did a really good, I'm talking about George a lot today. He did a really good video on why gold could potentially go to 10,000 an ounce from 2,000. And it's very good, and it has a lot to do with what's going on with China and Russia and how they're buying. Because the ruble, as you guys know, got crashed, during the war, so they moved a lot of their money into gold. So really, the gold reserves that Russia have right now are really the most valuable of anything that they do have as far as currency wise. So it's very, very interesting. So, but be careful too, because I'm not a gold expert.
Well, you're always gambling a little bit,
yep.
So
it's just
good to have some
currency
cash
too, though. Apparently,
you are. But at least with cash, you have it. So Lisa has an interesting premium question, and actually we're going to go a little deeper than what her question is. But she said, we live in a small town near Cape Cod. We have an opportunity to purchase 12 commercial units and a 20 commercial unit complex. By purchasing the 12, we have control of the HOA. I believe what would your recommendation be on purchasing something like this, given the commercial real estate climate right now?
Yeah. It's a heck of a good question. So there's a couple things. I have a lot of experience in this area. First of all, congrats on getting control. It sounds like you already figured that part out. The big things are going to be how much money the HOA needs. So what is the common area expenses needed today? In other words, repairs, not just repairs and maintenance, but CapEx. So do they need roofs? Do they need parking lot? Does it need print? Does it need painted? All of those things are HOA expenses. So that's number one. You need to figure that out because now you're going to step into 12 into 20 percentage. That's going to be on you. So that's the first thing. Also the vacancy on the 12 and the potential vacancy on the other 8. So the vacancy on the 12 is important, how long the leases are, because if somebody moves out, you potentially, as a landlord, have to pay for those tenant improvements for somebody. Let's say a yoga studio moves out and a dentist wants to move in. A dentist is going to have very different needs than a yoga studio. So that's what I mean by that. So those are all expenses that are up front by the landlord, covered by long-term leases, I understand, but you have to have big cash reserves for that. But I like the idea, and I think what I'm seeing is if there's a demand, if you feel like you can rent those 12 and the other 8 are rented, this could be a very, very, very good deal. But again, it boils down to math, and just know that. We have some commercial space, and different tenants are moving for different reasons. We are in a startup scenario right now. There's a lot of little businesses starting
They're
up.
popping up everywhere.
Yeah, it's kind of cool to see the entrepreneurial spirit coming up, but no history, no credit. There's a lot of stuff. So maybe you have some experience around all that. So, but it sounds like a heck of an opportunity potentially.
Yeah, you just got to be cautious. It's kind of, I don't know. I don't know if I would want all my eggs in one basket. So now you have all your eggs in one.
Well, if it is,
complex.
they might have other investments.
Yeah, but I'm just saying with those 12 purchases,
Yep.
All right. John from Premium wants to know, he's new to investing and looking to invest with other people's money. He has investors lined up, but he wants to make sure he's structuring the deals properly. So he's trying to give his investors an 8% preferred return paid quarterly plus expenses, and the remainder goes to him. His problem is that the 8% preferred return causes many of the potential deals to not work mathematically because I would then owe money. Am I doing something wrong, being too conservative, or am I just not finding good enough deals yet?
So it's a great question. The reason why you probably have a lot of investors is because you're offering 8. So 8's high. Not to say you shouldn't offer 8 because that is going to get you more investors. I think that's high by market standards today. So what I like to do is I like to take a look at the deal itself. So why don't you first find a good deal, and let's say it could produce 5. Then bring that to your investors and say, listen, I'll pay you 100% of what it produces, but that's the number, and then you can grow it from there. That's one great strategy. That way you're not behind the 8, because if something's kicking out 5 and you owe 8, you're going backwards 3, and if it's compounded, it's even worse. So I think either increase your deal flow. It's very, very hard to find an 8% today, cash on cash, that I've found, because prices have gone up and now interest rates are going up and expenses are going up. Now rent is going up too, so it's possible. But look at more deals and or maybe take a look at adjusting your preferred return.
Yep, that's a good one. That's a good one for new people trying to raise money.
Yeah.
So that's a great question.
It is.
Well, we are 12 likes away from 200, so please hit the like button if you are watching. Also, make sure to join us tonight for our happy hour. We're going to be talking about the recession. Yeah. It's going to be 5 o'clock Arizona time. KenMcElroy.com/premium. Premium Live, that code Premium Live will get you 7 days free. We're going to have a really good time chatting about that. You have a lot of...
That'll be fun. We have a lot of people signing for that, so thank you.
Yep. And then, so Chris from YouTube has a question. He says, do you think investing in a large apartment syndication is better than buying a fourplex, since rents are expected to increase and should be a better return?
Well, he just answered the question himself. I mean, the last part of that, if it's true, then yes. I mean, it's not, is a syndication good or bad? It's what's the difference between the two. So, if you have 2 different syndications, and they're both syndications, one's going to be better than the other, period. So, it's a mathematical choice, and it sounded to me like you answered the question on the fourplex. So if you could find something that is better than a syndication, then that's the obvious answer is yes, then do it. But for me, I always just look at the difference between what I'm investing in. I'm investing in all kinds of things all the time, and I always compare them with other things. So.
Yeah. Yeah. And just make sure you know what you're doing if you're going to be taking over an investment.
Yeah.
Well, awesome, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. We will see you again, hopefully tonight, if you join us at our happy hour.
Yeah.
And if not, we will see you next Monday.
Thanks, guys.
See ya.
As always.